And to the Muslim attendees, hope you guys had a good buka puasa meal just now. So we're just going to allow a few more seconds for everyone to come in, and then we will start. So it's 8:02 right now. Let's just give about another minute because I can see a lot of people entering. Yep. Okay. So today's topic will be on the Australia TSS 482 visa. And the one presenting will be Desmond Ang. We will start in a few more minutes for those who've just joined us. Yep, take your time, make yourself feel comfortable. And okay, I can see a few more people entering. Okay, I think we can start now. Go ahead, Desmond.
Thanks, Nurul. Can you hear me there?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. This is Desmond. I'm the founder of GMS, Global Migration Solutions, and the Australia Licensed Immigration Advisor. So today's focus is on this visa, TSS subclass 482, one of the employer-sponsored visa options. So our focus is on this 482 today. This visa allows both Australia business and overseas company to sponsor overseas skilled worker who is not an Australia PR or citizen to live and work in Australia. So as you can see, this visa is the focus of the Australia immigration this fiscal year. The Labour Party gave an importance to this visa. And from the quota allocation, you can see this visa stream has the highest allocation for this fiscal year. So that says the government is committed to promote this visa and to encourage as many overseas skilled workers to apply under this employer-sponsored category. So this visa is a temporary visa which allows you to live and work in Australia for up to 2 or 4 years. And there's a pathway to permanent residence after 2 years. So do take note, this visa could be very suitable to you if you're above 45 years old, which I'm going to talk about it. If you are a business owner, this could be a good option to substitute the business migration programs. And this could also be a good option for you if you are being sponsored by either the Australia local entity or the overseas company. So we're going to look into the details shortly. So first of all, these visa programs involve several steps. The first steps of these visa programs is the sponsored, which is the Australia company or the overseas company has to be qualified as an eligible sponsored. So the company must first apply to become a standard business sponsored, like what I have mentioned. This part doesn't really much to do with the visa applicants. It is entirely depending on the overseas or the Australia company to do so. So what is important under this stage is that the company must present themselves to the Department of the Home Affairs, where they provide supporting documents to demonstrate that the business is actively operating and lawfully operating the business, either in Malaysia, overseas, or Australia. So the typical documentation that they need to provide would be such as lease agreement, if they are renting a premises, the bank statements to show that currently they are actively operating with the current transactions. They need to provide last year tax returns. The company need to provide financial reports. This is important to demonstrate that the company is profitable and at least have the capacity to be able to pay the salary for the staff that they are sponsoring. The company must also provide company registrations to evidence that this company is legally registered. The business license is required, organization charts, the staffing records, for example. So to qualify as an eligible sponsor, these are the typical documentation. As you can see, the key criteria over here is actively operating and lawfully operating. So most of the people understood the 482 visa through the local sponsor, which is, the Australia sponsored. Now, I'm going to also highlight, it also involved, or most of the people may not be aware that overseas sponsor is also one of the pathway under this 482. Now, to qualify as an approved standard sponsor under the 482, as an overseas employer, the company must fit into one of these criteria. Number one, the company must either fulfill work or services for an Australian company. In other words, the company has entered into a contract with an Australian company and they are there to fulfill the work or services. Or when an overseas company is part of a joint venture or partnership agreement with an Australian entity, let's say the company in Malaysia or in Vietnam or anywhere in Singapore, when they have entered into a partnership agreement or a joint venture agreement with an Australian entity, then the overseas company can potentially be qualified as an eligible sponsored. Last, the third criteria that the immigration will take into consideration is when an overseas company show that there is a genuine expansion of their business operation into Australia. Yeah. So think about it from this perspective. If you are being employed by a company, with this nature, and the company can potentially sponsor you and for you to acquire or to obtain the visa 482 to be able to live in Australia, and work in Australia. Alternatively, if you are a business owner and you have entered into a business contract with an Australian company, for example, or a joint venture with an Australian company, and that could be a pathway for you to be sponsored, under this visa. Okay, I must highlight that among these three criteria, the overseas business expansion could be the most challenging one because the immigration is going to be looking at all the research that you have done. You must demonstrate that, there is a genuine need for you to establish your business in Australia, and a lot of preparation and documentation has to be submitted to demonstrate that there is a need for you to be based in Australia. So a straightforward one would be, for example, if you have already secured a contracts, with an Australian company and you are there to perform work or services, and this is the most straightforward options. Alternatively, the joint venture or partnership arrangement can also be, a straightforward criteria for you, for the company to be qualified as an eligible sponsored. So good news to those who is being employed by, an overseas company who has already have a business engagement with an Australian company. And if you are in the midst of exploring the Australia PR, and your overseas company can potentially sponsor you under this 482, right? So nomination, this is the second stage. There are 3 stages all in total, and we just spoke about the stage 1, which is to get the company qualified as an eligible sponsored. And now we are looking at the stage 2, which is the nomination. So next, the company can nominate you in an occupation to be sponsored for the 482. So when we talk about this nomination, what is important is, first of all, you have to have an eligible occupation. And the occupation would be under the short-term list, or it can also be under the medium to long-term list, or it could even be in the regional occupation list. So many of you may not be familiar with what is the short-term list, what is the medium to long-term list, what is the regional list. But all you need to remember is among the list, there are close to 500 types of the occupation that could potentially fit into your skill. Yeah. So once you have identified this occupation, right, then make sure that the occupation actually fit into the scope of the business. What that's really meant is, let's say, a restaurant. It doesn't make sense for a restaurant to sponsor an engineer. Yeah. So you must make sure that, whatever occupation that's being nominated, makes sense in this case. Yeah. So, so as I mentioned, it is important for the company who is sponsoring you to make sure that, that occupation fit into the nature, and the operation of the company. So the purpose of this nomination is to check whether there is a genuine needs of that position within the business. It is for a restaurant, for example, that I've just mentioned. It is for a restaurant to sponsor a chef, for example, or a restaurant manager, for example. Yeah. A property development company, it is for them to sponsor a project engineer as an example. Yeah. So also do take notes that the company who is sponsoring you need to perform labor market testing, which I'm going to talk about it shortly. But just before that, I just wanted to run through these 500 occupation. As you can see very quickly, this is the occupation under the short-term list, and it is close to about 215 occupation. So I won't be able to run through one by one, but do take notes. These are all the occupation under the short-term list. Yeah, let me just run through it very quickly. And if you have your handphone with you, you could just take a snapshot of the screen. Right. So there are plenty of the occupation under this short-term list. And you can notice, you may notice that most of these occupation are business professional. Yeah, business skill related professional. So there are a total of 215 occupations. And now I'm going to move into the medium and long-term strategic occupation list. These are all the highly skilled professional, such as engineer, for example, accountants, for example, corporate general manager, CEO, managing director, for example, all the highly skilled professional, yeah. So chemists, for example, yeah, all the medical practitioner, IT professional, yeah, and some of the trade skill trade workers, yeah. And under the regional occupation list, yeah, so it is much shorter. These are the more than 70 occupation under the regional occupation list, right? So if you were to total up from these three lists, potentially you might be able to identify or relate your skill or your experience to one of these occupation. Yeah. So talking about this labor market testing, yeah. So it is a process when the Australian employer have to attempt to fill up the skill position with the Australian workers before sponsoring overseas workers. So it involves advertising a job vacancy in the Australia recruitment channel. This is to test the local labor market and see if there are suitable, qualified, and experienced Australian citizen or PR available to fill up the position. Yeah. So just to take notes, yeah, the job vacancy typically has to be advertised over a period of minimum 1 month. under 2 different channels. So this is the minimum requirements. And you must be able to demonstrate to the immigration, those who had applied for this position are not suitable, for this particular position. Thus, the occupation need to be offered to an overseas workers. Yeah. And do take notes, the labor market testing, there are certain exemption available. And this exemption is given to certain countries' passport holder. And good news to Malaysian. For example, if the company were to sponsor a Malaysian passport holder, then the labor market testing exercise will be waived off. So there is no specific requirements for the company to advertise for this position if you were to offer this position or the job position to a Malaysian passport holder. So this is one of the exemptions given, but there are also many other countries' passport holder who is being exempted under the labor market testing. All right. Now, after that is being established, then the company need to pay you at the market salary rates. Whatever market salary is paid for a particular position, depending on where the position is being hired for. So for example, if this position is being hired in Sydney, let's say a project engineer, yeah, the salary could be different as compared to a project engineer that's being hired in South Australia, Adelaide. Yeah. So typically the salary in Sydney is much higher. So in general, the salary will be higher in Sydney, like I just mentioned, yeah, as compared to Adelaide for the same position. Yeah. So if there is someone being hired for the same position in the same company, all those will be taken into account for the market salary of the job. So what do I mean? If the accountant is being hired and there's another accountant being hired by this company, so alternatively, the company can also show the immigration how much is being paid for the existing accountant that is being hired in the same company. So that is also a forms of the a way to demonstrate, the salary, what is the average salary should be paid for this new position. Yeah. So the company, do take notes, the company cannot pay you for less than what the market is paying for an Australian PR for that job. So this control mechanism is set to make sure that, the company do not take the advantage by having to employ overseas workers and pay them at a much lower salary. Yeah. So as at now, the minimum salary rate is 70,000 per annum. That changes came in on the 1st of July, 2023. Yeah, it cannot be below that under the 482 visa. Yeah, do take notes to the company that's sponsoring an overseas workers, make sure that the salary doesn't go below 70,000 per annum, excluding the superannuation. Yeah, but you also have to consider what the minimum salary of the particular position. For example, the minimum salary for a project engineer that I've quoted earlier is around 120,000 per annum in Perth. Yeah, and you cannot pay anything below that. Yeah, so if you were to pay anything below that, then this nomination process will not be approved by the immigration. Yeah. So once you have established that, we are ready, to submit the nomination application. And what is important to be submitted under this nomination stage would be evidences such as the employment contract, yeah, where the contract has been issued to offer you a job, in Australia. And remember, we mentioned about the overseas sponsored. If the company is based outside Australia, for example, yeah, so you should be able to obtain, an offer letter from the overseas company as well, offering you a job, to be able to work in Australia when the 482 visa is approved. Other than that, we spoke about the evidence of the market salary rate, the labor market testing, if there's no exemption of the labor market testing, then you need to be able to show 2 job advertisements over a period of 1 month, how many candidates have applied, what are their backgrounds, and why is it that, they do not fit into the job requirements and they are not being offered the job. Yeah, so these are the typical documentation to be submitted at this stage. So after the nomination is lodged, right, then you can then go ahead with the final stage, which is the visa application. Now, this is the part when you will be involved, yeah, or you as in referring to the visa applicants and their family members will be involved. So first of all, depending on the occupation, you will need to submit the skill assessment on certain occupation, especially the trades occupations. A skill assessment is required. It is a process where you have to get your experience and your qualification assessed by the respective authority in Australia. And what is important is you must acquire the right qualification for that that particular position. For example, if you're an accountant, and you must be able to show that you have a bachelor degree. Without a bachelor degree, your experience would not be considered as a skilled level. Yeah. And engineers, for example, if you are being sponsored for the position of an engineer, and you would need to have a degree. There are certain occupations that require only a diploma. There are certain occupations that doesn't require a qualification, a formal qualification, such as corporate general manager, CEO, managing director. So if you're a business owner, these could potentially, a good options for you to go through the 482 as a substitute to the 188. Yeah. So other than that, make sure that you meet the English requirements. So there's no waiver on the English requirements under the 482. Do take notes. The English requirements is pretty low. It is on an average band 5. So of IELTS, you can sit for the PTE as an alternative to the IELTS, but you must score an equivalent to the overall band 5. Yeah, so these are the typical requirements at the final stage of the process. And a few things to highlight. So under this 482, you can include your family members, your spouse, and dependent children. The processing is fast. The steps 1, the qualifying sponsored, can come through as quick as 1 day to a few weeks. We have cases when the step 1 or the application was being approved within the same day after lodging the application. The step 2 nomination can come through as fast as quickly as also 1 day. I would say most of the times, we probably look at 2-3 weeks times to get the application approved. And the final stage will be taking less than 3 months. So in total, you're looking at securing the whole entire visa 482, allowing you to move over to Australia within a period of 3 to 5 months. Yeah. Do take notes, although I mentioned this visa 482 is a temporary residence visa, but this visa comes with, a primary school and education and secondary school education benefits. So if your kids are at the level of the primary school and secondary school, from the day 1 when this visa is approved, your children will enjoy the full education benefits. Yeah, so this is the beauty about this visa 482. Right, under this legislative instrument that was being introduced end of last year, the current government is committed to encourage as many overseas skilled migrants to get their PR through, or to get the work rights through this visa. And a couple of changes was taken place end of last year, which includes allowing everybody who is under 482 to be able to apply for the PR after 2 years. So this 2 years was being reduced from 3 years. Before this, it took the candidates, 482 candidates, 3 years before they can apply to convert into the PR. But as at end of last year, the law had changed, and to give a shorter periods, a conversion periods, which is 2 years to the 482 visa holder. Another interesting and encouraging changes that was taken place last year was to allow everybody from the 3 occupation lists, from the short term to the medium to long term to the regional list, to be able to convert into the PR as well. As compared to before, only the medium to long term occupation lists are allowed to convert into the PR. So these two are very encouraging in terms of, whoever that is qualified under the 482 visa. Now, from the beginning, I mentioned about this visa option could be a good pathway potentially for those who is above 45 years old. Do take notes, 482 doesn't have a age limits as compared to the skill migration programs, where the age limit is set at 45, or below 45. So under 482, there isn't an age limit. Yeah, for if you're above 45, you can actually participate or apply for the 482 should you meet the requirements and you're able to obtain a sponsorship from either an Australian company or an overseas company. But do take notes as you go into the PR, the PR pathway does consider your age. However, a waiver is given to those who is above 45 years old. Yeah, and one of the waiver take into consideration the amount of salary that you are being paid. If you are being paid for 167,500 per annum, then it doesn't matter if you're above 45 years old. And when we talk about this salary, do take notes. It is at times when you convert into the PR, which is 2 years later. Yeah. So just to give a summary of this visa, there are 3 stages involved. First of all, the first stage is the standard business sponsored. Whichever company that is sponsoring you, whether it is based in Australia or it is an overseas company, do take notes, they need to be qualified as an eligible sponsor. And the key criteria to be qualified as a standard business sponsor is that the company has to be actively operating and lawfully operating. Then we have the nomination process. Under this nomination process, the company must justify that there is a genuine requirements for this position to be filled by an overseas workers. Yeah. So when we talk about an overseas sponsored, yeah. So if your company is based in Vietnam, for example, or in Singapore or in Malaysia or anywhere outside Australia, for example. So it is very logical and reasonable for the company actually to transfer you, over should the company enter into a business contract, with an Australian entity. Yeah. And it is good news if your company already engaged with, an Australia business. Or alternatively, if your overseas business or the company that you're being employed under has a partnership or a joint venture, then this could be an opportunity that's open for you. So a lot of people may not be aware about this overseas sponsor option. And a lot of people think that, when it comes to 482, it has to be a local sponsored and you have to find a job, from Australia. But do take notes, at least I hope that tonight you are being aware that the overseas sponsor is, an options that is readily available as well. Then the final stage is the visa application, where you are getting yourself, your family member, your spouse, and your dependent child to submit under this stage. And when the visa comes through, all of you would have the rights to be able to live and work in Australia. It is very interesting. Do take notes that the spouse has the same visa as you, that says the spouse has the same rights and equal rights for her to be able to work or him to be able to work in Australia as soon as this visa is being granted. Yeah. So that concludes the 482 visa. I would also like to just briefly highlight about other alternative options. If you find that, the 482 visa is something that is not relevant or difficult to fulfill, then for those who is below 45 years old, do take note the general skill migration is also a focus of the labor governments at this point of time. And the global talent visa, without age limit, if you're above 45 years old, you're the expert within your industry, you have received awards and the recognition in your industry, this could be the potential options for you. And in short, we call GDI. Yeah. So then we have family sponsor option. If you are being married to an Australian or a PR, or you are already a PR and you're looking at sponsoring your parents, for example, then the Australia does provide the employer-sponsored programs as well. And the business and investor visa, these programs are currently under review, and we are looking forward for the Australian government to make the announcement on the new criteria and the changes. And we are keeping our finger crossed and hoping that, the new criteria will be announced after July, if not the latest by next year. So this summarizes, the various pathway and the 5 main important pillars for you to obtain the PR in Australia. Yeah. So just allow me to give a short introduction about global migration. So GMS stands for Global Migration Solutions. We are an Australian licensed migration advisory firm. For the last 20 years, we make sure that, we are committed to assist the client through, and we are handling not just the Australia programs. Yeah, we literally manage all kinds of programs under the Australia programs. We do also assist clients under the New Zealand entrepreneur and investor programs. We do also assist clients under the United States EB5 for those who is seeking to obtain the green cards. And we do also assist clients through the Portugal Golden Visa and the D7 programs. This is a very unique and very interesting programs for those who is seeking for a European citizenship status, right? So over the last 20 years, we have helped more than 13,000 clients in total, and we maintain a high successful records over the years. The various states governments from Australia and the representative has visited us and supported us with all the talks and all the events that we have hosted for the past years. Yeah. And other than myself, I would just like to introduce my business partner, James Allen Hall, who is also a licensed immigration advisor. He's as knowledgeable, and he, other than being a licensed advisor, he's also a professional trainer for a migration lawyer and a migration advisor. He provides CBD trainings to the professional of this industry. Myself, before started off my career in the migration industry, I worked as a chartered accountant in Sydney. And that was a time when I studied the migration law and get myself registered and had a change of the profession. And the time passed quickly, and this is my 20 years in this industry. And Audrey Anthony, who is our associate director, who is very much focusing on the professional skill migration programs, the GDI programs, family sponsored programs. Yeah. So being a licensed advisor, we are registered with the Department of the Immigration. We are bounded with the code of conduct. We have to look at the best interest for the client, and we have to be transparent and always consider what is the best options for our clients. And we are based now in various countries, from Australia to Singapore to Malaysia. We have service office in Vietnam, Cambodia, and as well as Hong Kong. And we support the clients from this region. Yeah. And it is also a privilege to be nominated as one of the top 25 global migration agency CEO by the U Global Immigration magazine from United States, through our success records. And of course, this is not possible. This is achieved through the support and the trust from the clients. All right. So what is next? So you can get in touch with us, contact us if you want to have a specific discussion or advice on your circumstances. We are more than welcome to hear from you. And from there, we will identify what is the best options for you to actually obtain your PR. Then, I would suggest that you take a couple of seconds to scan this barcode. We provide regular updates in all these channels, as and when there's a changes on the migration policy, there's a new updates. We always make sure we reach out to you by sharing all the latest updates from all these channels. All right. I conclude my sharing this evening, and I suppose there are a couple of questions posted. And Nurul, over to you. I'm ready to take the question if there are questions available. Yeah.
Yep, sure, Desmond, definitely. And thank you so much for the very informative presentation. So yes, there are quite a number of questions here. I will start with the first one. So this person would like to know, under the list of skill occupations, which we possess the skill, knowledge, and experience in Malaysia, but not in Australia, do we need to obtain any local certifications in order to be sponsored by local company over there?
Sure. It depends on what is your skill set. If it is the trades occupation, there are certain trades occupation that require you to be assessed. For example, electrician. If you are working as an electrician, then you need to be assessed by this authority called Trade Recognition Australia. Yeah, whereby they will assess your qualification and whether you acquire the right experience, and assessment is required. But most of the occupation, if you are engineers, if you're accountant, if you are a marketing specialist, for example, all you need to have is 2 years of the minimum experience plus qualification. Do take notes. Yeah, qualification has to be assessed as comparable to the Australian standards. I have seen qualification from certain country when it is listed as a bachelor degree, and it may not be assessed as comparable to the Australia degree standards. But so that's the reason why you should reach out to us. We will go through all this detail, your qualification, for example, and to check whether or not it is assessed as comparable to the Australian standards. And when I mentioned about assess, as in there is a specific reference that we can refer to. Yeah, it doesn't involve submitting your qualification to Australia authority to get it assessed. We can very quickly verify if your qualification is comparable to the Australian standards or not. Yeah, I hope I answered this question.
Thank you, Desmond. Okay, moving on to the next question. For the 482 visa, would there be any difference in terms of different state allocation? For example, application for Melbourne and Victoria, is it more difficult compared to Adelaide or Perth or even Tasmania?
Okay, this question, when we are talking about these various states, right? This is more relevant if it is a skill migration programs, because the skill migration programs under this visa subclass 190 require state nomination. But do take notes, under 482, it doesn't require state nomination. What is required is the company that is offering you a job, must be qualified as a standard sponsored. So it doesn't really matter, where the company is. What is important is the company has to be actively operating and lawfully operating. And I guess the only consideration is the salary of the position. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, if the company or the position is being hired for a smaller city, then the salary could relatively be much lower compared to the same position in the big city. And so these requirements comes under the stage 2 nomination, when the company need to demonstrate the amount of salary that is being offered to you is at the average market rate. Yeah. So there are certain process, that we will guide you through on how the company can demonstrate that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Desmond. And the next question, for the 482 visa to convert to PR after 2 years, do I need to be physically in Australia for the entire time, or can I be overseas and enter Australia off and on?
Yeah, you can travel. It is the multiple entry visa. If your jobs require to be based or travel overseas frequently, yes, then you can travel in and out. There's no minimum stay requirements per se under 482. That actually provide a very flexible residency options. So do talk to us if you have any specific idea, or you have restrictions on the residency, and do talk to us, and then we will advise you on how to actually plan to make sure that you comply with the requirements. Yeah.
All right, so this next question is actually really good. Must the visa 482 holders stay with the same employer throughout the 2 or 4 years, or can they move and change employers? And the continuing question is, after the duration of the visa 482, is it a straightforward transition to PR visa 186, or is there another set of process?
Sure. So there are two questions here.
Mm-hmm.
First being whether or not the person has to stay throughout the same employer over the 2 years. The answer is not. In fact, the government is committed on the 482 visa, and changes was taken place whereby allowing the new company, if you're on a 482 visa and there's another company looking at taking you over and sponsoring you, you are allowed to actually start working for the company in the process of transferring you or sponsoring you from the company A over to the company B. As versus in the past, you won't be able to do so until the visa is being approved. Yeah. So answer is not, if there's another company B looking at sponsoring you, yeah, for the 482, then you can actually move over to another company B. But this transfer is not a matter of using the same visa, and transferring it from company A to company B. The company B, whoever that's taking you over, has to be able to sponsor you and go through the similar process. Then the process of converting into the PR, comes under this visa subclass 186. Yeah. So when you are holding the 2 years of 482 visa, and when you were to convert into the PR under 186, a lot of the requirements and criteria are being waived off, such as English requirements, such as skill assessment, for example. So all these requirements will be waived off, and we call this transitional stream. Because for a PR option under 186 direct PR options, the direct PR options of this employer sponsored, there is also a direct entry. Yeah. So those who is going through the 2 years of the 482, It's called transitional stream. Yeah. So the process is not difficult. You need to be on a 482 visa for 2 years. Yeah, and draw the salary, which is, and there isn't a gap of the salary. Yeah, for example. Okay. Yeah, so I hope that this question is being answered.
I certainly believe that you've covered that question fully. And okay, let's just take one more question. Let me have a look. Okay.
I noticed there are too many questions. We may not be able to cover every
That's right.
question here. There are more than 20 questions as I see over here. So do take one more question, and then, due to the time constraint, I encourage for those question not being answered by myself this evening, do reach out to us, or alternatively, we will try to reach out to you with an explanation on your question. Yeah.
Okay, so the last question for the day. After I got approved with the 482 visa, can my wife move, work, and live in Australia permanently together with me? And PR can be applied after 2 years for both husband and wife?
Yes, correct. This is interesting, as I mentioned earlier, right? The spouse will have the same work rights. And when we talk about, the spouse who is holding the 482, who has the work right, the spouse is not restricted to work under the same employer. So if the spouse can actually jump the jobs in between the employer, and without having to transfer the 482 from, the first employer to the second employer. So in fact, after this whole entire exercise, the spouse has, a slightly advantage when it comes to securing a job and moving around the jobs. Yeah. And so the spouse can be the principal applicants if the spouse fulfill the 2 years requirements and get into the PR, and the main applicant, the husband, for example, who is initially who is the principal applicants for the 482, can actually be substitute as a secondary applicants. So yes, both the husband and the wife, yeah, can be the principal applicants for the second stage, which is the PR 186 visa, depending on whoever that fulfill the condition. All right. So I hope that you enjoy this session, and you gain some knowledge and some understanding about this 482 visa. And the message that I wish to send across to everyone here is this 482 visa is just not restricted to the local sponsored, but do take note the overseas sponsored is also available. Yeah. And good night. And I hope that every one of you have a good rest. Yeah, and take care. And see you again.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.